Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order, acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me are Diane Knight and Ron Merritt. The assessor today is Arif Dost Mohammed, and the administrative personnel is Fran Picato. We'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision have been described in each application will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order to be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following a swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application be brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on today's docket, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 3 on our docket today. Ms. Picado, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Arif Das Mohammed.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please stand. Please state your full name.
Antoine Francois Acco.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right, so we somewhat unusual here. We only have one property, but 3 assessment years. So the property is Unit 2 of 125 Furniture Drive, and we'll start with the year 2023. So, Mr. Das Mohammed, you can proceed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the 2023 assessment roll includes 2024. So can we maybe just do those two together?
Sure. The information will be the same, I presume.
Yes. Yeah.
That
Okay.
makes a lot of sense from my perspective also, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Then we'll proceed with both years. So again, you can proceed, Mr. Das Mohammed.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Board revision file number 24-4426 and file number 24-4427. Roll year is 2023. Address is suite number 2, 125 Furniture Park. Business assessment ID is 41417. We have an annual rental value of $984,840 with a total premise area of 116,000 square feet. We're utilizing an overall ARV of $8.49 per square foot. I'll just mention that I note that there is a discrepancy in the leased area between what the assessment department has and the applicant is reporting by about 2,249 square feet. But either way, we'll go with the 116 for now, 116,000 square feet. So we're using a base rental value of $6.34 net. We're utilizing occupancy costs of $2.15 per square foot, since there is no air conditioning in the subject property. So our base ARV is $735,440. Occupancy costs work out to $249,400 for a total rental value of $984,840. And I do have a recommendation. I will just go through the brief and then I'll give you the recommendation. So at the bottom is my rent comparables. So net rents range from $5.75 per square foot to $8.96 per square foot. Leasable areas range from approximately 95,000 square feet to approximately 161,000 square feet. On the following page is the map of the subject area. So it's located in the northeast quadrant of the city. On the following page is an overhead view of the subject property. At the bottom is a street view. Same with page 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. At the bottom of page 8 is another map showing the subject property and the comparables. And on pages, for the following pages, I have overhead shots of the comparable properties also. So page 9 at the top, there's 51 Burmac. At the bottom is 1001 Regent Avenue. On the page 10 at the top, 230 Panet Road. At the bottom, 200 Began Avenue. On page 11, it's Redwood, 1345 Redwood. On page 12 is just the basic definition of what the annual rental value is, and that's from the website from the city of Winnipeg. So basically, the annual rental value is the amount of rent that your business will typically, the space your business occupies will typically generate in the market. ARV is not necessarily equal to the net rent actually paid for the space. It is representative of the prevailing rental market of similar space in the region. The occupancy costs in this rule here are the same for all industrial properties. So heating, water, and air conditioning will all be the same for all industrial properties, and those are arrived by an average, and they're spread out through all the properties for the industrial department, just to be fair and equitable. I'll note that on April 1st, 2021, which was the reference date for this rule year, the subject was entirely leased by one subject or one tenant. And they were utilizing 412,000 square feet. So on the following, at the bottom of that page is my recommendation. So I am recommending $5.95, which is the actual rent in place. It is supported by the market rental comps that I have shown. So if we use the $5.95 per square foot and we add the occupancy costs, I am recommending a revised annual rental value of $939,600. With that being said, I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Uckle?
Just to give the board some idea of the issues that I've discussed with the assessor, so it perhaps helps focus attention on why I'm asking questions. I identified with the assessor 3 areas that we want to bring to the attention of this board. The first area was occupancy costs, actual versus the average that they're using. And the second area is extraordinary capital costs, which the tenant financed through his lease. And the last is whether rents used for property assessment for the same effective years should prima facie be used for the annual rental value. Just to focus in why I'm asking certain questions. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Mr. Dohamed. The first question I have is you have seen the actual costs, occupancy costs for this tenant. They're in our brief.
Yes, you provided them in your brief, yes.
Okay. Had you spoken to the owner to determine why the occupancy costs are so much lower than the average which you have used?
No, I have not.
I'll have an explanation on that, members of the panel later on. With respect to the base rent, you provided yesterday the 2022 statement of income and expense for this landlord that was provided to me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have that document in front of you? I just want to confirm a number that's in that document which you provided to me.
Give me 1 second, I can bring it up. And that would be for the 22 income and
Yes, the 12 months ending 2022.
yes, I have it.
Members of the board, since I only received this yesterday, I wasn't in a position to do a filing. And so the board sees what I'm referring to. Could I have the permission of the board to add this as an exhibit, being another document provided by the assessor to me?
Okay, Mr. Das Mohammed, do you have any objection to that?
No, I don't. It's public record.
Okay, it's all right. Thank you. Welcome back. So we have decided to admit the documents. So Mr. Huckle, you can.
Mr. Harding, I think I got ahead of myself here. So we are working on the 2023 roll cycle. I believe the income and expense mailer is for the 2025 roll cycle, because the reference date for the 2023 roll cycle is April 1st, 2021. And I apologize, I just got ahead of myself there.
Okay. Well,
I believe if I ask questions of Mr. Dostomad Mohammed that it'll become pretty apparent why it's relevant to the 2021 numbers.
Okay. Well, since we've made the decision to accept the document, you can proceed.
Thank you.
Subject to relevance, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So with respect to this particular property, the reason I'm getting into this is under the Assessment Act, the relevant date is April 1, 2021, but you have to look at the property as it existed in the assessment years as 2023 and 2024. That's the reason I'm getting into this. Mr. Mohammed, on page 2, there's a capital costs summary. Do you see that?
Yes.
And my information is that the total shown for that capital cost summary of $1,795,517 were all tenant improvements done for this specific tenant at the tenant's request.
Sorry, where is the capital cost? I see the roof.
But so you see the roof, but then there's under that, under
Yes.
the heading other, do you see also it says rebuilding, upgrades, forklift, furniture, office equipment? It indicates a number of other improvements. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that, but I also don't see the tenant listed in the tenant role, that the applicant, I mean.
So that deals with my question on establishing the capital costs. I'll need further evidence on that. And then the last area that I had indicated I would cover, Mr. Assessor, Mr. Dr. Mohammed, would be the rents used for the property assessment that went to a disputed hearing in September of 2022. So I have a couple questions to add with respect to that. The material which I'll reference is at tab 16 of our evidence or our brief. And everybody let me know when they found tab 16.
Sorry, we're going to your brief now?
Yes,
Page
at that
16?
tab, there's an assessor's brief.
On page 16?
Tab 16. I don't know what the PDF page is. I have physical copies.
So that would
Okay.
be the PDF page 99 is when
Thank
that
you.
starts.
So I believe it would be
Just a
that.
second, I'm not there yet.
Okay.
99, okay, got it now.
I don't know if the PDF pages, if 99 shows as a cover page, Winnipeg Board of Revision disposition of items September 29.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay. And if I'd like to direct Mr. Dust Mohammed's attention to PDF page 103. There should be on that page, if my counting is correct, Mr. Dust Mohammed, a number 8, which shows 2023 Realty Assessment 125 Furniture Park. Do you see that?
Yes,
Now, you weren't the assessor who presented evidence at that hearing, were you?
I can't remember, honestly. I think it would have been my colleague, Mr. Frolic. Yeah, it was Mr. Frolic.
And but you can confirm it went to a contested hearing where the owner presented a request for a lower rent in the income process, and the assessor relied on its brief, which starts at page 104, correct?
Okay, so it went to a hearing, and then the Board of Revision made a decision, and they confirmed that value that it was assessed at.
Okay. And you come to that conclusion because at page 103, the last sentence, and I'm quoting, hopefully everybody sees it. You see that the value is confirmed firstly, correct?
Yes,
And then the board explains why it confirmed it. And I'm quoting, the decision is based on the evidence presented by the Assessment and Taxation Department. Do you see that?
yes,
Okay. And I've reproduced on the next page of this PDF and the following pages. So it starts at page 104, I believe. Am I correct?
yes,
That is the assessment brief that would have been referenced by the Board of Revision, correct?
yes, but that was for the entire building, not just for
Mhm.
the permits.
And when you say the entire building, it's not the 400,000 and some square feet, which is the entire building. This building was split up in two assessment rolls, correct?
Yes. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say that this property had been at the municipal board, and we, the agent and the assessment department, worked out a global agreement from roll years 2018, 2020, 2023, and 2025, which were all done without prejudice. There were concessions made on both sides. There was municipal board appeals that were withdrawn on both sides also. So just to be clear that at the municipal board, it was all done without prejudice and concessions were made on both sides. So
Yes, the board is well aware that 15-1 agreements are without prejudice and simply an agreement between the parties as to value with no indication of how they arrived at that value. And frequently, each party has their own concept of how they arrived at the value,
yes,
but
yes.
it's a number that both sides could live with.
The final number, yes, yeah.
My question is related to the board decision and the assessor's brief. It's not related to any negotiations that might have occurred after. I have a couple other questions of you, Mr.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I'll just caution that we generally put little weight on previous board decisions. They have little, without hearing the arguments and that were presented and that sort of thing, we cannot put a whole lot of weight on them.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Chair. If we could go to page 109, I believe, of the PDF.
Okay.
Um, Am I correct in indicating that the rate for the industrial space in the assessor's brief was $3.95 per square foot?
There's two rates there, so I guess the overall rate would be
Well, it would be very close to 395 considering the
yeah,
difference in areas.
yeah, so 397.
Yeah. And the number at the bottom right-hand side of the page, 109 of the PDF is the number that was advocated based by the assessor based on the evidence in this brief, correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
If I can interject here, Mr. Huckle, it appears to be about like page 110 of the PDF.
Okay, I have my page numbers wrong. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm working from a paper copy, so
Okay.
I appreciate your interjection. I'm just trying to tie in the number here, 10,599 at the bottom right hand of the page, which was the number accepted by the board. I acknowledge the chairman's caution on that, but the evidence, the sworn evidence of the assessor in that case was that that was the correct assessment and it was the correct rent. Correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened at that hearing. And Mr. Chairman, should we be asking questions of my evidence before we get to the
Yeah,
applicant?
I was going to interject there. Yes, Mr. Ko, you can present the evidence as you wish. Um, But this is your chance to question the assessor on his evidence.
Well, part of the, and I'll elaborate further in my evidence, Mr. Chair, is that, and the continuation of my questions, I think will make it pretty obvious why I wanted to confirm that was the evidence of the assessor in that case, the sworn evidence, and I'll move on to the next page of the PDF,
Okay.
which were the comparables used to arrive at the rate of $3.95 per square foot. And as Mr. Dust Mohammed has said, if we take into account the office space, it bumps it up to $3.97. Now, sir, you chose not to include from the list of comparables the Inkster Boulevard property, correct? In your current briefs.
Yeah, so I don't know how the other assessor chose these comparables and why he chose them. I know what I chose.
Okay.
He is looking at a building which is a lot bigger in square footage. He's looking at entire buildings. I don't know what his motivation was.
I don't expect you to speak for him, but my question was to you. You excluded that comparable in your analysis, correct?
Correct.
And it's the same reference here, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you also excluded the third one
Sorry,
down.
give me 1 second.
Is this not the previous cycle? The
So the
yes,
reference,
this would have been a 2020, and there was that 3-year period there too. With
yeah, so
If
the
we go
reference
back,
date was,
if we go back to page 104, I believe, of the PDF, we can see the reference date and midway through the page being April 1, 2021.
okay.
So it's the same reference date as the maybe confusion or complication is that in this
Yeah.
particular assessment, the assessor retroactively by supplementary assessments added a 2023 and a 2024 assessment, both of which have an April 1, 2021 reference date. And this brief also deals with an April 1, 2021 reference date as confirmed on page 104 of the PDF.
Yeah, you were correct in that.
So turning back, I think I was at page 111, the list of comparables. Are you there, Mr.
yes, yeah,
Mohammed? Okay.
Yeah.
You confirmed that the first property on Inkster is not in your current brief, correct?
correct, yes,
And the third property on Hutching Street is also not in your brief, correct?
correct.
And the last property on McLeod, that's 861 McLeod, is also not in your brief, correct?
It's come to my attention in the last or the 2025 roll cycle that is a owner occupied or the related party, so I wouldn't use that one.
Thank you. You'll acknowledge, sir, that I asked via document request and if necessary by subpoena to provide the workup for, and this is the assessments workup, not a negotiated deal, the assessments workup, which would be similar to page 110
for,
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. We're segregating hearings here. Apologize. I'll withdraw that question. I'll ask it again when we deal with the 2025 assessment. Those would be all my questions, member of the panel.
Okay, Ms. Knight, any questions of the assessor?
I do not.
Mr. Merritt?
I do not, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, a question I have, 23 and 24 are supplementary
yes.
assessments. What caused the supplementary to be issued?
I think, yeah, I don't know, Mr. Chairman. I don't know why the supplementary was issued.
Okay.
I can, if you give me a second, I do have some notes.
I was just wondering if it corresponded to the current occupant subdividing the piece of the building.
Yeah, it was due to because the new owner moved in. We moved them in. It seems like in 2023. So in 2024, we found out that they were there, so we issued a supplementary.
Okay. All right. No further questions on that. So, Mr. Cole, you can begin your presentation then.
Thank you very much, members of the board. As I indicated prior to starting my questioning of Mr. Dost Mohammed, I'm trying to focus the evidence on three main issues: the occupancy costs, the base rent, excluding the extraordinary capital costs, and also the rent-free period. And lastly, the impact, if any, of the assessor's evidence for the same reference year, being April 1, 2021. So with that general introduction, I'll make my presentation. Just very quickly on my background, because I don't think I've appeared before this panel before. I'm a lawyer at Thompson, Dorff and Sweatman. I'm an honorary accredited appraiser of the Institute of Canada and have edited 3 course books that property evaluators use in getting their certification. I apologize for going through what might be obvious, but there's some legislative provisions that aren't in the assessor's brief, which I included in our brief. Firstly, and here, Madam Clerk, you're going to have to help me on the pages. I'll start by the first page after the cover page, which is the submission of the tenant with respect to annual rental value. Does everybody have it?
Yeah.
So as the assessor noted, the actual area being leased is a bit higher. It's at 118,249 square feet. So I've done my calculations based on that and not on the number that was used by the assessor. As far as a base rent, and I'll explain why I agree with the $3.95 per square foot rent, but that comes from the evidence of the assessor's brief at our tab 16, and I'll go to that evidence and explain why it justifies that rate. The next part on that summary is the cost to occupy, and I'll deal with that right away. The costs to occupy are, I'm going to say, extraordinarily low and different than any other property in the city of Winnipeg, and there's a good reason for that. It used to be Defer, and there's still furniture manufacturing in that set of buildings. And as a result, all the scrap wood is used in a furnace, which then heats a boiler, which then heats all the space, including this tenant's space. So the actual costs to occupy, as confirmed in our brief, are set out on this summary for heating, hydro, and water. For air conditioning, there's no difference between our position and the position of the assessor. There is no air conditioning there, so it's a zero cost allocated. And from those numbers, then I get the recommendation I'm making on the annual rental value. I will then start at tab 1, which is the City of Winnipeg Charter. I am going through some of this. Firstly, sorry, I'll flip to tab 2 initially. I don't know what PDF that is. It simply reproduces a section that confirms that the burden of proof on these matters are on the assessor. He has to provide enough information to satisfy you on the numbers that he's recommending. Then I flip back to tab 1, which is extracts of the City of Winnipeg Charter. And although the assessor has pulled information from the City of Winnipeg site, the actual tests set out in the legislation are different than what he's quoted in his brief. So what page would be section 318 sub 1?
Uh,
318 sub 1.
Yes,
Yeah, I have a
Page
page,
Page
page
eight.
8, yes.
page 8.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I should have brought my PDF version here. So the first thing, and this relates to why we'll be submitting that the actual occupancy costs need to be the ones taken. In 318 sub 1, it defines the annual rental value, so that's what's an issue right now, is deemed to include the cost of providing heat and other services necessary for the comfortable use or occupancy of the premises. So when there's discussions in the subsequent sections about annual rental value, those tests on how that's to be approached also applies with respect to the occupancy cost. So then I move to the next section, 318 sub 2, and this has changed over time. Now there's a more specific direction that the assessor must follow. And as you see in the section, in determining the annual rental value of the premises, the city assessor, and it used must, he doesn't have a discretion, take all factors into account so that as far as possible, premises similar in size, suitability, advantage of location, and the like are equally assessed at a fair annual rate based in general on the rents being paid for similar premises. So the reason I bring this section to this panel's attention is that this is a unique property. There is no other property that benefits from lower occupancy costs that the assessor has pointed to or can point to. He confirmed that he didn't ask the owner why the actual occupancy costs were so low. And according to that test, it's my submission that if you don't have a similar property, so also benefiting from the free burning of supplementary scrap wood to heat, you shouldn't be using other properties' occupancy costs and applying it to this property. That wouldn't be just or fair. We also asked the assessor to provide a list of the properties used to arrive at the numbers he used for occupancy costs. He didn't provide us with that list. We were looking for some kind of proof that this was a reasonable similarity to other properties, but that notwithstanding our request, it wasn't provided. We are asking the board to use the actual numbers set out at the beginning of the brief. Now I turn to the second issue that I've identified, the rents. Again, in fixing the rent, as I've quoted from that section 318 sub 2, there's a duty. It's basically the same test as the market value test that you use all the time in property assessment. You have to get the similar premises, location, etc. Those are all factors that always get discussed in the market value test. The other thing that has to happen, and it's the next section in that legislation, it's 318 sub 3, is that the result has to be fair and just. There's also a link in the Municipal Assessment Act. Under section 18 of the Municipal Assessment Act, there's actually a presumption that if there's a number that is there, that it's fair and just, and you can't start changing your number. Unless there's good reason to do so, the presumption lies there. And why do I refer to section 18 of the Municipal Act? Well, that section is made applicable by the City of Charter when we look at business assessments. So I'll just read it in for the record. Section 18 provides as follows: notwithstanding any other provision in this act and assessment. So that's what happened in for the April 1, 2021 date is presumed to be properly made and the assessed value to be fixed at a fair and just amount where the assessed value bears a fair and just relation to the assessed values of other assessable properties. So I turn back to the assessor's brief, which we have incorporated into our evidence, but which was put in as sworn evidence in the September 29, 2022 hearing. As I previously identified, I think it's page 110 of the PDF.
Yes, we have it.
Yeah, the rate for the industrial area, which was larger than what the leased area is currently, but it's all part of the same building. Heated by the same system. The conclusion was $3.95, and then plus a higher rate for the office space. I listened to the tapes of that hearing. I agree with the evidence of the assessor and the conclusion of the Board of Revision that that's an appropriate rate. There are some issues with this particular property as compared to other properties. The first of which is location. Other properties will be close to major routes, will have rail spurs. And whereas this property is not in a bigger industrial park, it was basically built by the Defer family, the buildings to do its furniture business. So it's less desirable in that context. And it was built for a special purpose. Now, the three rents that were excluded from Mr. Dust Mohammed's current analysis were relied on by the previous assessor. I agree that the first, and this is on page 111. I'm on page 111 now. This Inkster Boulevard space, it's an older lease, but the time period continues to be valid over the reference year. It ends in 2025. Our reference year is 2021. So 4 years ago, the leased area is reasonably close to the current premises. We're at 118,000 square feet. And the Inkster property was at 134,664. Average wall height is a bit lower. It's at 22 compared to these premises at 24, except for office space. Year that it was built, 1970. We've got a more recent building here, 1982, with some additions in 1999. But the rent was at $381 per square foot. So slightly lower than the recommendation. Hutchings Street was a 2020 lease. It was a slightly larger premise. Again, 147,669 square feet. Wall height is pretty close. We've got 25 feet instead of 24 feet. Built in 1974. And with a reported rent of $5.72, which is higher, but it's understandable why the conclusion was at $3.95, because the location of the current property is not as good and not as desirable for an industrial tenant. The last one, which was excluded, which was relied on to reach, apart from all the other ones here, of course, to reach the rate of $3.95 per square foot, is the McLeod property. Mr. Dustholm has indicated that he doesn't put much weight on this one because it's not an arm's length transaction. It nonetheless is a transaction, maybe to be given less weight. I'm not sure if Mr. Dustholm's information is correct. I didn't ask the owner and the tenant to what extent they are related and to what extent this rent should be discounted. But it is of a similar size. Again, it's a little bit lower in size at 101,000 and some square feet. It's a bit older building, 1968, and the rate is at $498, but again, better access. It's my recommendation based on the data that's in evidence and was sworn to also by the assessor at the 2022 hearing, that the appropriate rate to use is the rate set out at page 1, or rate set out at page 110. I agree with Mr. Dustholm Mohammed's small adjustment from 395 to 397. I haven't performed the calculation, but I'm not going to get fussed over 2 cents a square foot. Now, the one thing I asked Mr. Nas Mohammed for were the business assessments for the comparables at these pages 111 and 112. Because of the test in the legislation that other properties have to be treated fairly and justly. Unfortunately, because of the retroactive issuance of the supplementary assessments, that information is not available to us on the public website of the city. That's why I asked Mr. Dust Mohammed to provide that information. The information on the City of Winnipeg website as to what other industrial premises are being assessed at is with respect to the next hearing that we're going to have as part of these, is the 2025 assessment with the April 1, 2023 effective date. I was looking for that information to see whether or not there was any evidence that was possible by the assessor to support that a different rate than $3.95 was an appropriate rate for the 2021 business assessment. There's the recommendation is by the assessors to go to $5.95 per square foot for the April 2021 assessment. Based on the lease, makes it a bit challenging because we're trying to split the information between two. The lease is a post-reference lease. My first position is that that lease is not relevant to your determination for the April 1, 2021 date on the rate itself, maybe with respect to improvements, but not on the rate itself. I'll deal quickly with, if you're inclined to reject my evidence that that lease should not be considered in arriving at the average rate, there are two things that I'd like to point out with respect to that lease. The base rent of $5.95 set out in that lease, which is at tab 11 of our brief, tab 11.
That would start on page 43 of the PDF.
Yeah, I haven't.
Page 43 is the top page. That's all.
Okay.
So that would be page 41.
So just so we have the dates right, I think it's PDF 44 is the first page of the lease. Am I correct?
Yes.
The lease is made in on May 4 of 2022, which is post-reference. On that first page, you'll see the commencement date, which is January 1, 2023. You see that, the definition of commencement date? That's still on page 44.
Yeah.
And then I believe it should be PDF page 49. There should be on that page section 301 sub A. Has everybody found that?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm bringing this to the board's attention, and I'll detail it further in the next evidentiary hearing, but there is also a rent-free period here. So the true rent is not $5.95, it's something less because you've got a rent-free period. But the major issue that I wanted to bring it to the attention of the board, again, I'll deal with it a bit further in the next hearing. I believe it's PDF page 72. It should be entitled Schedule D, Landlord's Work.
Yeah.
So but what happened here is the tenant had the option of financing it through the bank, all this work, or choosing to bump up the base rent to cover, and it's in evidence in front of you, the nearly $8 million of capital improvements. So none of the other comparables had this kind of significant tenant improvement included in the base rent. And once we take into account the fact that the tenant decided to bump up the base rent for the cost to amortize this $1.8 million, we basically get back down to the recommended assessment level. So that completes my explanation for the 2023 and 2024 supplementary assessments and why we're recommending should be adjusted slightly instead of $395, $397 per square foot, and why we're recommending the actual costs, because none of the other properties have this advantage of the scrapwood heating. So it would be unfair and it would penalize this owner by assuming that he has the same occupancy costs as other properties used to arrive at the cost. If it was a standard building similar to this without that supplementary free heating, I wouldn't be making this presentation and making that recommendation to you. But this is an unusual circumstance, and with the application of that the assessor must find similar properties, and that applies both to occupancy costs and rent. We say that the actual occupancy costs should be the ones that are used. And the one thing I neglected to refer you to, these are actual occupancy costs for 2023. And it puts us in an awkward position because it's the 2021 is the reference date. And presumably some of those hydro costs have increased. We're going to see they do increase in the assessor's calculations. But for purposes of this hearing, we're recommending that the owner's actual costs in 2023, as stated in the evidence, and I'll give you the reference in the evidence, is the amount that we should be using for, it's at tab 12, I believe. So that could be about page 75 of the PDF, I believe, page 75.
Okay.
Everybody, it should be entitled Additional Rent Review Frost Fighter. Has everybody found that?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a couple things that require a bit of explanation on this sheet. You'll see the square foot for the building. The building is actually 421,629 square feet. For some reason, it's split up. It was split up in 2 rolls.
Excuse me.
But that's the total area. And then where I get the square feet of the leased area, that was measured by an authorized person and agreed to between the tenant and the landlord. So I've used that higher number, which is higher than the assessor's number, at 118,249 square feet. And then you'll see that the way the occupancy costs are calculated, it's proportionate to the entire building. And then down the left-hand side, I'll just show you where I got the numbers in my recommendation at the beginning of this brief. You'll see utility hydro. Have you found that, Mr. Dustin?
Yes. Yes, it's there.
And if we go across, the actual cost is at 64 cents per square foot, which is unusually low, but that's what it is, or what it was in for April 1, 2023 to March 31, 2024. Then gas, which is another occupancy cost considered, again, is unusually low at 16 cents per square foot. And finally, utility water at 9 cents per square foot. The reason why these costs are so low, in addition to the boiler and the scrap wood, is this facility is basically an assembly plant. What they do is they receive various components of industrial heaters, and they come in at one end. The space was designed for them. They then follow an assembly line where all the parts are put together. There's no intensive use of hydro. The only thing that they have is some air lines to do air wrenches to assemble some of those units. There's no gas used in, or very little at all, used in any kind of heating process. And the water would be limited to the water in the office space and lunchroom space used by the workers. There is no water at all used in any of the industrial process of putting the parts together to eventually ship these. So all the parts get assembled. Once the units are assembled, then they're put into a packing box. There's people that use staples that put all that wood together. Then it goes to a shipping area, and the orders are shipped to various clients throughout the world. So that's why the occupancy costs are that low. I'm open for questions now from Mr. Dust Mohammed and then to the panel.
Hey, questions of Mr. Dust Mohammed.
Yes, please. Thank you. Mr. Hal, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name either.
Yeah, yeah, it's like AKO, ACO.
Akko, okay, thank you. Mr. Akko, would you agree that the city of Winnipeg states that the annual rental value is derived from prevailing market rents plus the cost of comfortable occupancy?
Uh, I would agree that whatever's in your charter governs what you need to do, and I read that out, and it's much more specific than that, Mr. Dustolomet.
And would you agree that largeable leasable areas are leased at lower rates than smaller leasable areas due to economies of scale?
That depends on the circumstances. As you know, appraisal theory generally, that might be a rule, but it depends on, for industrial space, ceiling height.
All being
The
equal.
less of the space, it'll depend on location. So this is a bad location compared to other locations of industrial parks. So there's a number of factors. A larger space, I agree with you, makes it harder to re-rent out, be it 118,000 or 200,000, because there's not very many tenants in the city that are looking for that much space. They're usually owner-occupied spaces.
So all things being equal, you would agree that larger leasable areas are leased at a lower rate than smaller leasable areas.
I've stated what my evidence is. It
Okay.
depends on a lot of factors. Not all things are equal in this circumstance.
Are you aware that in order to be fair and equitable, that all industrial property owners occupancy costs are average across all industrial properties?
I know that's the way the city does it, and most of the time that would work, Mr. Dustholm, because if you've got industrial buildings that are basically the same and have the same occupancy costs, it's fair and just to do it. But if I go to my child and I say, listen, you have to pay 3 times as much, even though your costs aren't that high, that child is going to say, Dad, that's not fair. That's not fair. I'm not being treated fairly because my actual costs are so much lower. It's not in a reasonable range.
And are you aware that the municipal board does not allow rent incentives such as free rent period to be included in calculations?
Well, it depends what calculations you're doing. If you want to arrive at the net effective rent, I can tell you, I do a lot of work for developers. I'll tell you exactly how they do it. They want to recover X amount of dollars of base rent. So to be able to do that, they'll do a couple things. If the tenant wants a rent-free period, they increase their base rent to recover that rent-free period. The other thing that they do is if they have, like in this case, a request by the tenant to put in about $1.8 million of TIs, they'll say, well, either you pay for it, or if you don't, I'm going to increase your base rent because I want to recover that over a reasonable time period at a reasonable cap rate.
You have not provided any rent comparables, have you?
Yes, I have. I have used the rent comparables and listened to the evidence of the assessment department. And I've explained why, after listening to that evidence and after considering the comparables that are in that brief, I, as an honorary accredited appraiser of the Institute of Canada, am coming to the conclusion that the $3.95 is a fair rate.
But you have not provided your own comparables besides what the brief had in it, or my colleague, Mr. Frolick, had in his brief.
Well, there's no reason for me to reinsert those comparables. It's part of my evidence. My evidence was that those are reasonable comparables, and duplicating them somewhere in my brief I didn't think was necessary.
It's your position that your client would actually be paying $395 had it not been for improvements instead of $595 per square foot.
Well, the first thing is that causes an imaginary world, which we have to look at comparables. My client did not negotiate in 2021. So I can't speculate what would have happened in 2021. I know what happened in 2022 when they negotiated the lease. But in my opinion, the fair rate, once you take away the $1.8 million and the rent-free, as of 2021, April 21, is the 395 as suggested by you to 397.
The document that you submitted for evidence, the 2022 mailer that the board just accepted. If you look on the tenant roll there, if you could just let me know when you're there.
Yes, I am. I have it.
Okay, so you see the first tenant there is Guard Wine. Is that correct?
I'm maybe not on the same. Yes, it's on the second last page of that doc.
Yes, at the
Okay.
top there, yeah.
Yes,
So would you agree that that tenant pays $11.75 per square foot for basically the same area that's leased in that building?
Again, that's post-reference rate. I don't know the details of that lease.
Yes, but
I didn't speak to Garden Wing.
right, but it's the same building and it's the same square footage basically, and they're paying $11.75 per square foot.
Yeah, but see, I walked that building last week and I saw the area Gardwine did. And what this landlord had to do when it split the demised wall, it had to adapt its building to both accommodate Gardwine and the numbered company. So there's a lot of things I don't know about that lease, which would need to be understood before I could comment on whether where that rate per square foot is something that we should be looking at or using, or whether there's appropriate adjustments. Quite apart from it's after the reference date.
But we did have this submitted as evidence and you utilized it also, so I'm also utilizing it. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Echo, there's a discrepancy, and I'd like to deal with that in regards to the city's at 116,000. You're at 118. So, who is correct here?
I based on the certificate, I didn't adduce it as evidence, but the tenant got a certificate from somebody authorized to measure pursuant to the terms of the lease. And that certificate came to 118,000 as shown in tab 12 that I drew your attention to. So my evidence is that that is the accurate number, the number that should be used. I could have gone with 116, but I was aware that there was this certificate at 118, so I've used that number.
So it tallies up in regards to, if we look at the tenant roll, it would total up to 118,249 square feet.
That should be the correct area of the space. That's correct, Mr. Merritt.
All right. And this is sort of a unique building in regards to, the heating and the electrical and the water. I know there's no air conditioning in there. So would this be detrimental to the sale of the building because it's unique and it has unique costs associated, which are a lot lower?
I'm trying to make sure I understand your question. You're indicating, well, Mr. Hacko, the operating costs are lower. Wouldn't that influence the tenant's decision on how much it would pay as a base rent? Am I understanding that's?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So the I can't answer how the tenant approached the negotiation, Mr. Merritt, because I didn't ask that particular question of the tenant. Tenants are usually concerned about total cost of renting if they're faced with various options. But and you mentioned the $0 for air conditioning. If we applied the average rate for air conditioning, and I've seen it for other industrial buildings, to this building, even though it didn't have any, there would be something that's incorrect. So in the same, I say the same reasoning applies to the other occupancy costs.
All right, I thank you very kindly. That's all the questions that I have. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Knight.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, question on your tab 12 there. You've got the hydro rate at 64 cents, which you've used.
Correct.
What happened to the gas?
Did I make a mistake there? I thought I had put that in. Maybe not. Hopefully I didn't make a mistake. I had on my front page cost to occupy. I have heat and in parentheses gas
Okay.
at 16 cents, which I pulled from the page you just referenced, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I see, yes. So it's only heated. All right, yeah, okay, I see. My mistake. Okay.
No, there's no gas use. I walked the premises, went through all the assembly process. There's no gas used in the assembly process. The only electrical that would be consumed in the assembly process would be the air compressors that create air pressure for the air tools. They have lines hanging down so that they can connect to them, both the ones used to tighten screws and the stapler to do the crates. The only thing that he explained that it's very minor and it occurs rarely is they do some welding for I'm going to say a makeup housing. It's not the actual heater. But it's not their main source of business.
All right. Thank you for that. We'll take a 10-minute break to 10:35 and then come back and do the 2025 year. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to the 2025 year. Wish to add that there's no need to repeat things that were in common with the 2023 and 24 years, just what's different about 25. So if you can, Mr. Dust Muhammad.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Order Vision File number 24-4464. Roll year is 2025. Reference date is April 1st, 2023. Address is Unit 2, 125 Furniture Park. Business assessment ID is 41417. We're assessing total ARV at $1,016,160. Again, the premise area is 116,000 square feet. Overall ARV per square foot is $8.76. And that is broken down as such. So base ARV is $6.42 per square foot. Occupancy costs are $2.34 per square foot. We have, and then that results in a total ARV of 1,016,160. I'm using the same rental comparables as the previous files we just did. Rent comparables range from $6.04 per square foot net to $9.16 per square foot. Again, I'm willing to make a recommendation on this. So on the last page is my recommendation. So I would use actual rent at $5.95, and then our occupancy costs, and then revised ARV of $961,620.
Nine.
$961,620. It should be on the last page.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I see what I'm doing. I'm looking at the wrong year. Never mind. All right.
Yeah, and yeah, so I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions of Mr. Echo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your suggestion that we can take the evidence from the first hearing as applicable to this hearing without having to go through stuff that really expedites things. I appreciate that. Mr. Best Mohammed, do you agree that we asked you for the workup information and documentation used to arrive at the potential rent for the 2025 property assessment?
Yes.
Here, I put it to you that we were advised by the landlord that the potential rent rate used in the 2025 property assessment for the April 1, 2023 effective date was $4.34. Is that correct?
That's what you have stated in your evidence. As I said previously, any negotiations we had were without prejudice.
But my question wasn't about negotiations. You would have had a workup in the same way as you did in your brief in assessment records, correct?
Yes.
And I'm asking.
It never did go to hearing because it was negotiated, so I did not look at the workup. So I don't have the workup in front of me.
But I did ask you to look at the workup and let me know whether my information at 434 was accurate, correct?
Give me 1 second. Well, no, because it was a negotiated value, so the workup doesn't come into play now.
I will suggest, Mr. Code, that a workup that wasn't entered in evidence, wasn't sworn to by anybody. I don't know how much value we can do on it. It's no more than somebody's calculation.
I'm reluctant to get into what might seem as an argument, but the onus is on the assessor to prove. And I've asked specifically, and I have an email that your board secretary has where I asked for the information on the comparables used to arrive at potential rent for the April 1, 2023 assessment. And the assessor has refused to provide that. I'll have submissions on the relevance of the assessor not providing that information. I'm not asking for the negotiated number. I'm asking for what was put into the system to support the assessment and the potential rent. So I'll move on, but I've asked my question. I'm just trying to explain why I was asking the question.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to skip over things that we've already covered, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I had a list of questions here and I'm trying to ensure I don't ask the same ones again. I'm going to go back to tab 16, page 111. Do you have it in front of you, Mr. Dust Mohammed? It's the rent.
I'm just bringing it up.
Thank you.
Page which?
I believe it's page 111.
That's of your brief?
Yes, it is of our brief.
Okay.
The one we just used or the one?
I put all my material for both hearings in one brief. I did not create separate briefs for the separate assessment appeals.
Okay.
So that is the page with the comparables for the 2023 appeal?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry, the hearing was in 2022, but I want to ask some questions with respect to the comparables. The first one on Inkster Boulevard had a lease start date of 2014 and it's for 11 years and 3 months, correct?
Yes.
So it would overlap the April 1, 2023 effective date, correct?
There could be step-ups, so I'm not sure if that rent is applicable in 2025 for the 2025 appeal. Usually there's step-up rents.
Do you know?
I don't know. It's
Okay.
not my brief, so I don't know.
Okay. I'll suggest to you that there wasn't a step up.
Are you familiar with the property?
I have seen the property. It's my turn to ask questions. You can ask.
Yes.
The same thing with respect to Hutchings. It was a 2-year lease, and that would bring us to January 1 of 2022, which is still evidence of what would happen in 2023, although it's not exactly on the right date, correct?
Again, I'm sure there was a step up. Rents don't stay in place for more than 1 year, mostly, from what I see.
Okay. Have you seen the lease? Do you know?
I haven't seen the income and expense mailer.
Okay.
That's where we get our values from.
Okay. And again, you'll acknowledge that I made a specific request for that information from the assessment department, but you declined to provide it with respect to the
It was
Inkster
declined
property.
because the appeal was not brought forward. It was withdrawn before there was an appeal hearing scheduled.
But if the department has the income mailer, it did provide it for this property, but it chose not to provide it for the other properties here.
This property in 2023, it was heard at the Board of Revision. In 2025, there was no hearing. It was withdrawn. There was a negotiation that occurred.
But my request, just to be clear, I'm just trying to focus on my question. I just want the record to be clear. I asked for the income and expense statement related to this property. Correct? And
Are you referring to Hutchins Street?
Hutchins, and also Inkster, and also McLeod.
Wouldn't there be privacy issues with that?
That's, yeah.
Well, and not if it's on the public record, and
So it would only be on the public record if these properties were appealed and they went to a hearing, then it would be public record. But I'm not sure if these were heard.
there, but what you did provide is you provided all the reports with respect to your own comparables shown in the brief for the effective year of 2025. You provided all that information that was provided by landlords, correct?
For what I put in my brief, yes. And only the ones that went to an appeal. If they didn't go to appeal, you'll notice I didn't provide all the income and expense meters.
Okay.
Only if they went to an appeal would I have provided them.
Okay. Now, finally, with respect to the McLeod property, do you know whether or not there was a step up? Did you see the lease?
I don't know, and again, I'll just say that earlier this year in 2025 appeal, it was brought up by an agent that 861 McLeod was not an arm's length rent, so I didn't even look at it.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions that are in addition to what we previously covered.
Okay, Ms. Knight,
I have no questions.
Mr. Merritt.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Echo, your presentation then.
Thank you. So I will not go through the occupancy costs evidence again. I think we've covered that, and given that it's evidence actually relates more to this effective date of April 1, 2023, as we have the actual occupancy costs for that time period. So I'm not applying those retroactively. Those are being applied as of the relevant date, which is April 1, 2023, and we have the actual ones. So that's the only difference there. With respect to the annual rental value, I'm not so sure that I've adequately covered this in my previous presentation. The reason that evidence is important is that there's a link between what's usually done by this board on market value and business assessment, the annual business assessment or rental value. The test for both of them is market. So when you do the income approach, you do a property valuation. Principles which are accepted is that you have to demonstrate what a fair rent would be. And that isn't necessarily what is in a lease. It's based on comparables that are available in the market and adjusting those comparables for differences. The other thing is I didn't ask for the negotiated numbers, but I did ask for the actual numbers used to arrive at the property assessed value. And I've pointed out that the assessor needs to provide evidence or has a burden of proof on that issue. I asked the assessment department to provide me with the data used to calculate the potential rent and the comparables used to come up with that. And the assessor refused. Identifying the comparables that were used to do the possible rent is not a confidential thing. It's commonly produced in reports, including what I've put at tab 16 and what's in the material that was produced by the assessor. So I again believe, because of the overlap and the closeness of the 2 years and the step up, so I'll deal with all of those. For April 1, 2021, the number was $3.95. I've used, if we go to the front of my brief, I think page 3 of the PDF. It should be entitled Submission of Tenant with respect to annual rental value for 2025. Do we have that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've used 434, which is a step up of about 10% over 2 years. I've provided in oh, sorry, I'll back up a little bit. I've used the 118,249 square feet, Mr. Merritt. Again,
Thank you.
we say that that's the accurate number and not the 116. And the base rent of 434, which is a 10% bump up from the previous rate. In my opinion, that's a reasonable bump up in 2 years for the rents. And it's also supported by the comparables that I've discussed in the other hearing, with the same comments on perhaps the last one. I'm not aware whether it was non-arm's length. It appears that the assessor was advised by somebody else, but didn't speak to the owner himself. I didn't speak to the owner himself either. So I can't comment further on that one at 498. But I do know that none of them have the special capital cost element that our property has, which in fact bumps up the base rent to the amount that the tenant actually paid in the negotiated lease, which I referenced. The cost to occupy, I've used the same costs when you look at my sheet, and they were detailed and done on the analysis that I've discussed. Now, why do I view the data at tab 16 is still being relevant at page 111? The data that is there is all larger space, and it ranges from something that's lower to something that's higher than my recommendation at 434. And this property, I'm getting into repetition here, doesn't have the same access and utility and everything that was done to this property. By the way, part of that $1 million was what I would call $1 million wall. It's amazing what code does to you. To be able to retrofit the space for this tenant, there was a major devising wall that needed to be done with special sprinklers, special fire rating between the 118,000 square feet, special doors. It's supposed to be fireproof for I don't know what kind of time under the fire code. But this in and of itself, to demise according to something that was needed by this tenant was a huge cost if the tenant was going to go in there. So in my respectful view would be to penalize this tenant if for some reason the base rent included this additional cost imposed by the city for fire code protection all along the space that it uses on the interior. Just want to go to what we've marked as an extra exhibit, which the assessor brought my attention to, which is the 2022 income and expense statement. At I think it's the 4th page in that the assessor brought my attention to, members of the panel. If you found it, it's the leasing space. We don't, again, the assessor has the onus, but we don't have any evidence with respect to guard wine as to how that rent is calculated, whether it's triple net, whether it includes occupancy costs or otherwise. And I'm not criticizing whoever completed this form too much, but the next tenant down is this tenant whom I'm acting on behalf of, the 615-245-7 Canada. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they put the leased area at 104 942. Those two items are supposed to come up to the assessment, I guess. I'm not too sure. But we know that number isn't accurate. It's not the number that was used by the assessor. He used 116. And that's not the actual number that we got measured at 118,249. So without actually seeing documents, I don't know what weight you can place on this particular information on guard wine. That completes my comments on what I've filed and trying to avoid duplication. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Questions, Mr. Das Mohammed?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Halkut, you would agree that on my page 1 of my brief, at the bottom there's 5 rental comparables listed?
Yes, they're the same 5 that you listed for the other assessment appeal we've gone through.
Okay, and you would agree that comparables 2 to 5 are in the similar square footage as the subject property premise?
Yes.
Okay. All right. In regards to you just mentioned you just referred to the I&E that with guard wine in there. Is that correct? And you were indicating that you're not aware of how these who filled out this form. I believe it was DeFer, Elsa Dave Doe from DeFer who filled out this form. So
That's your information.
I believe
If
they were
nothing
they were the
nothing to
owners at the
challenge that.
time. Sorry?
If that's your information, then I've got
Yeah,
nothing.
they're the owners at the time. This was submitted online, so the signature part doesn't come out on that printout. In regards to your page 111, I take it you're utilizing these the comparables that my colleague entered into his brief again for this property for 2025, is that correct?
For the April 1, 2023 effective date, correct?
Okay. And did you look to see if there were any step-ups for those rents?
I asked the department to provide me the information it had, and I received none.
Okay, but you didn't look for your own evidence, is that correct?
That's correct.
In regards to your landlord's, on page 72, your landlord costs. There's no mention of this is going to be charged to the tenant. It says the landlord would construct the following improvements. Is there any indication that the tenant was paying for this?
I'm aware of that part of the negotiation. I didn't file it. I have in my material here, the offer of the lease, which was done in March 28 of 2022. And this tenant is a client of ours. I am aware that it had the option to either get financing for that $1.8 billion of improvements required for it to be able to occupy the space. It included not only that hugely expensive demising wall, there was cement that had to be put inside for a ramp, some additional doors that they needed for their work. They needed to adapt the premises by doing airlines, etc. All of that's listed in Schedule D, which I drew your attention to, Mr.
Yeah, I see it listed, but I don't see any indication saying that the tenant is going to be paying for all those improvements.
What I indicated, that wasn't my evidence. My evidence was that there was leasehold improvements required for this tenant. And the tenant had two options. The tenant could go to the bank and say, please finance $1.8 million, roughly. I'm just ballparking the 1.79. And give me finance on that because I've got a 10-year lease. Or he could go to the landlord, which he chose, to say, well, listen, will you do that? If you increase you're allowed to recover those costs through an increase in base rent. That's what happened.
Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Merritt, questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman, at this point. Thank you.
Ms. Knight?
The only thing I can see is that the heat, the electrical and the water prices, you kept the same throughout. There's no raise in those.
That's correct, because what I did is I applied the current rates, which are applicable to April 1, 2023. If we go to page 75 of our,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those are April 2020, 2023 to March 31, 2024
Okay.
costs.
Okay.
And because the tenant didn't occupy this retroactively to
Right.
April 1, right? They just came in April. We had no numbers for this tenant for the April 2021 date. It
Okay,
just
thank you.
exists.
That's all.
Okay, and I have no particular questions other than a comment is that should we accept your valuation, we will be rounding them to the nearest number evenly divisible by 12. So as per the normal procedure. Thank you for that. Mr. Das Mohammed, do you wish any summation?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Akol.
I think you have my position and you have my brief, so I think you have all the information you need.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we have now heard all the properties on today's agenda, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentations once again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks.
you.